Yes, you get to see you get to see the intersanctum.
I love it.
Of our foils and our flubs. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So 3, 2, 1, clap. 3, 2, 1.
Ooh, that was actually pretty in sync.
I'm proud of us.
Yes, very proud.
So that's your clapper?
Exactly. That's how I'm going to be able to to sync the sound. Is I look for that clap and then I
That
sync
spike.
up the sound. Yeah, that's like a big spike, and then that way it won't be off, and she won't ask you a question, then you laugh like 10 minutes later.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. They
Though
probably do that
sometimes
in
my
old
jokes
movies.
do have that kind of delay.
Oh, that's true. No, I don't know if you heard Norm. He said in old movies. That reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain when they showed the sound at the party. These are my lips syncing with the sound, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's amazing! It's a fad." And then they sing and dance. That's my description of Singing in the Rain. Are you ready, sir? Oh no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In the rain.
The vocal stylings of Norm Gunzenhauser.
You're welcome, everyone.
All right, are we ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Ready graphics? Ready theme? Cue back.
Good evening. For your information tonight,
And I love the idea that it doesn't matter how famous you are, how much money you make, you still have those primal fears about where do I get my passion now? Is that all there is? What's next? What do I do? This mid-age crisis that he was going through, he was really struggling.
Hi, I'm Jessie Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And welcome to an interview we have been waiting to give you for just a little while.
Yes, so funny story. We conducted this interview in late 2018. Yes, wait for it. Late 2018.
Indeed.
My apologies to Mr. Gunzenhauser.
Our most patient supporter.
Such a patient supporter. So we had invited Norm to come on the show to talk about season 2 because he was heading back to LA, and we assumed we would hold it for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And then we thought, well, why don't we hold it for early in 2020 when we get to all of his episodes.
Mm-hmm. And then something happened. And getting to his episodes took a little longer than anticipated.
Yes. So you may notice that this interview is in person and not exclusively, not that, of course, the lovely Jessie has been.
I'm always in your heart.
I wanted to say Zoom, and I was like, I didn't know what Zoom was back then. Why would I use the word Zoom?
We're a Skype cast.
Skype cast.
But what I will say is that even though this conversation was a while ago, there are so many parts of it I still recall.
Same.
I still remember. I cherish, because I think you all have figured out how much we cherish Mr. Norm Gunzenhauser. Genuinely think it was worth the wait.
Yeah, and just like with Denise, it's such a great sort of bookend to the end of their episodes for the season, and particularly for Norm, because then he left after season 2 and doesn't come back until later on in the run of the show. So this was very special for us.
We hope you enjoy it.
Bye. Will the mystery guest please sign in?
My name is Norm Gunzenhauser.
And you are our first return guest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think Steve did too,
Well,
correct?
Well, yes, I guess technically, but we talked to him longer in the same time. We just had to make it 2 episodes.
Oh, I didn't know
Which
that.
is another reason why we wanted you on, because you were our first interview.
Because I felt very insecure. I thought, they liked him better, so they had him on for 2 shows.
I know,
I
felt
sucked.
so. It's so funny because I felt so bad. I don't know about you, Jessie. That's what I was. Like, oh, he's gonna think. But it was our first show. And listen, I have to say, I was saying before off mic, I got stuck on the train. We had scheduled you for 2 hours.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know where Park Slope was, and so I literally left like an hour and a half early.
Oh, no.
Because I was so afraid that I would.
That's what apps are for.
I had the app. I just
sorry, I'm
didn't
mocking you.
know if I was going to miss the trains or
Oh, you're so.
get stuck in the train.
You got here just in time. It was perfect.
Well, I was sitting at a Starbucks, if you must know.
Aw.
Yeah.
Oh, I would always rather be there far too early
Yes.
and have a
same.
Starbucks to sit in
Yes.
than run late because of
I
trains.
mean, that's really what they're for that and writing screenplays.
Oh, and that's what I was doing. I brought my little pad, my pen, and did a little work
Great.
and waited.
Well, we wanted to have you on because we are knee deep into season 2. And that was your last season for a while until you came back near the end. But also an exciting season because you guys won the Emmy.
We did, yes. There were so many great episodes of that year. Particularly, I mean, Tom and I wrote 3 fantastic episodes that and I could not tell you which one I liked the best, but Miles' Big Adventure was just so fantastic. And then, of course, and you haven't covered that episode yet, but our Practical Joke episode was just ingenious.
It really was.
And that really was a lot of help from Corby. So, it was just one of those great episodes where the story just kept on unfolding and unfolding, and you just had no idea what to believe, who to believe, and then ending on a great surprise. So, yeah.
That's an episode I'm really excited for us to get to in this season. It's such a classic.
And to remind everyone, that episode is called Frank's Appendectomy.
Yes, and the reason for that,
Please.
There's 2 things we did. Because it was a Practical Joke episode, we wanted to fool the cast. We wanted to show up on a Monday table reading, having Joe Recalbuto believe that we're going to do one of those old cliche tropes about ending up in a hospital and having your appendix taken out probably at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So we decided to play a joke on them by naming it Frank's Appendectomy. Had nothing to do with hospital or an appendicitis attack. And then the other thing we did was we put fake montages for each of the cast members that never saw the light of day past that Monday reading. But the only one I can remember is Corky dancing like a stripper on a table in Phil's. So we wanted each of them to go, what is going on? Because I don't think they had read the script. And so, we wanted to fool them right from the get-go.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's so in the theme of the episode.
It's just really, really just so great. I haven't seen it in a long time. I don't know how it sounds. It's funny when I look back on Murphy Brown episodes, and it's not often, they're slower than I remember. I always, in my mind's eye, hear them faster.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
I'm always just a little disappointed that they're so slow sometimes.
Well, this one really surprised me. I had not seen it in a while because, first of all, the title, which now makes me think is super, super meta, that it's a fake title and a fake episode. But I had sort of forgotten how many times someone is duping someone or duping someone or duping someone. It was almost like a nesting doll.
Yeah. Did you ever count how many times? Because I don't know.
Well, let's see, because I just watched it. So Murphy fakes Frank. Frank fakes Murphy. Then Miles and Jean fake Frank and Murphy. And then Frank and Murphy fake out Miles and Jean. And then Jim and Corky fake out Murphy and Frank. And then the secretary fakes out them, right?
And then we missed one, I think. And then Miles fakes out the whole group because he gets...
Yes, but Miles and Jean, though, they do it together. So
correct,
I got that one. So
correct.
that's...
Yes.
I think I just lost count on my fingers.
So it was about 6?
Yeah,
maybe?
I think so. I think it's about 6. That's a lot.
Yeah, I think that's the grand total.
For a half hour, or let's say a 27-minute episode, that's a lot.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have it when we cover it.
But it's funny going back because the whole opening is that Frank thinks that he has found Deep Throat.
Yeah.
Which, of course, now we know who Deep Throat is.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think it gives a completely other different layer to it because you might be watching it going, oh, this is before they knew.
And didn't they say to him, somebody said, in fact, the furnace man, it was Murphy's furnace man, says to Frank, don't wait too long to jump on this because someday a scenario like this will unfold and I don't want you to think that you missed the boat on it.
Yeah, that line actually really
and
caught me.
And it actually happened.
Yeah.
What was his name? Felt.
Yes.
Richard Felt? Mark Felt.
Mark Felt.
Correct.
I believe he was played by Liam Neeson in the movie.
That's funny.
Just odd casting.
I prefer him played by Kirsten Dunst and Michelle Williams in the movie Dick, which is one of my favorite political satires.
But yeah, no, that line really caught me, actually.
Yeah, it's a very powerful line in a way because then you suddenly realize, here is a investigative reporter whose entire legacy could be built on whether or not to go through with this. And he does. And if he didn't, we wouldn't have had an episode. So glad he did.
I think that's something that's interesting that we sometimes don't think about with shows like Murphy that are lovely little moments of the crossover into reality and what their jobs actually mean. And when you see those parallels in our real life, you're like, oh, right. Like he would be the guy trying to break this story. And when we get those real world parallels, it makes it so interesting to consider, especially to consider that everyone's just being a bunch of ninnies.
And I think it was a really good early episode, even though it was it was in the middle of...
It's actually more towards later in season two. Yeah, it's kind of the back end, I would say.
It's such a good early episode because we didn't really know Frank Fontana yet. We didn't know any of the bigger stories he might have broken. So emotionally, you were in his corner. You really wanted him to make a name for himself. So
I felt
it was just so brilliant.
I felt it was structured really well because you feel really bad for Frank when you think that he's going to give up a bigger story for this fake story, and also does not paint Murphy in the best light.
No.
She's really, even from the beginning, when she brings Phil into it, and she comes out laughing.
It's a horrible thing to do. It's a horrible
thing. Woodward, right?
Yeah.
It was Woodward that she brought into it as well. Like, that's an elaborate prank. And then she comes out laughing. I just went, not funny.
Yes.
You know, and I kind of love that. I mean, we talk on the show of Murphy Brown being sort of what they refer to these days as an unlikable woman. That there's so much in television, particularly in early television, that women had to be likable. Mara Tyler Moore, that girl, they weren't allowed to be human and maybe not be 100% likable. And that is what Murphy Brown is. And she really opened the door for a lot of women on television. But particularly in this episode, she's not very likable at all. She's really mean. Which is great that then it gets back on top of them.
Then you have the comeuppance.
Yeah.
So it all pays off. But I was just going to say that if you sort of look at it as hardworking, tired people who are always have their nose to the grindstone, you sort of understand that they at times would play these mean practical jokes just to break up the
I hadn't thought of it that way.
The monotony or the exhaustion of always breaking stories, just like we do in the room. You know, sometimes you wonder how we get any work done because we bring our families into it. We, obviously we get a little snipey in the room at times. But I think it all feeds into your art, and probably for Murphy too. It probably keeps them energized in a way. And yes, it backfired, but
yeah, I think so. We talk about this in another show that we love and we mention quite often is The West Wing. Is that idea of those jobs where the stakes are so high and it's so real and very real world. You're not just part of entertainment or that kind of thing. Like, they are actually part of breaking the news that affects people's lives. And those people have to be able to cut loose. And I enjoy seeing them cut loose together, even if it's very imperfect and flawed. Because I think, we talk about the quote unquote unlikable woman concept, but I actually think those imperfections make her more likable because it humanizes.
But if a man had done the very same joke on somebody, you wouldn't think twice about it. You wouldn't even think twice about it. But because it was a very strong woman, an iconic woman, a woman you respected for all her flaws, it hits home a little bit more. If she had done it to Miles, she could have done it too. But if she had done it to Jim, that would have been inexcusable.
Really good point.
But she did it to her best friend.
And there is brought the fact that after she stops laughing, that, Frank listed her house in the newspaper, I believe, So this is something that they definitely do to each other. This one is really far when you see that he's, it's affecting his work. But that is a good setup. This is what they do to each other. This is how they show their love and affection.
And I'll be quite honest with you that this comes from someplace in me because I love practical jokes, and it's way too long to get into now, and I'll tell you off the air, but I pulled a practical joke on a writer friend in Moscow that I, to this day, feel so bad about. In fact, I just came back from Los Angeles about a month ago, and we talked about it again because it really was unbelievably insane what I put him through. And he then did get back to me in a very mean way. So obviously these shows do come from someplace within all of us, and that's what you want, right? That's what you want. You want the writers to dig deep into their own sick psyche and come up with something really fun.
Well, we were told the story, I forget if it was Steve who told it, or maybe it was Russ, that you faked out everybody with a video that was supposedly Rob Lowe's sex video.
Exactly. Oh, it was the greatest practical joke ever. And it was back when the big Panasonic VHS cameras were, being sold. And has he already told the story? Because I won't go through it again.
They told the story. It's
so,
okay.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And it got around the stage so quickly. And I think I became Candace's hero after that episode.
Well, I will find out after the fact which episode it was so everyone can listen. But what I appreciate is that you kept it going for 10 minutes.
Yeah. And I do remember this, and I don't know if Steve or Russ mentioned this, but when the tape was revealed to be a fake, I just remember we were all sitting around a couch looking at the porn, the fake porn.
But it was just darkness, right?
No, it was actually me, but you couldn't see my face, obviously. You saw legs, you saw my wife.
Oh, it was much more graphic than I realized.
It was a whole video thing.
Wow.
With fake voices and fake dialogue. Oh, we did everything.
Okay, this I did not realize. Well, that's committed,
It was
sir.
a whole, we
so proud
cleared
of you.
out our bedroom because I saw the Rob Lowe tape, and he was in a motel room with
I've
a beer
seen it.
bottle on the pillow, and all we did was show our legs and our feet, and when I walked by the camera, you would just see my shoulders and never my face because people would obviously know it's me.
Yeah,
it was a whole thing.
Wow.
And then all I remember is once it was revealed that it was fake, I just remember Diane. She didn't join us around the couch. She stayed at her spot at the end of the table, the writing table. Oh. And all I remember is when she found out that it was a fake, she literally shot up like a rocket and spit either coffee or soda out of her mouth. And I always said this, that if you could have bottled the energy that was expelled out of complete relief that wasn't a porn film, you could have lit up Los Angeles.
That was not explained to us either. It made it seem like it was just the guys.
Yeah, no, it was
did to the whole room.
Everybody.
Oh,
it was the whole room.
You should look into, are you familiar with the actor Josh Malina?
Sure.
That's his thing.
Oh, it is?
Like practical jokes to the Murphy degree. I mean, like, I don't know how people are still friendly with him based on, they just must love him so much, which is also a great testament to Josh Malina, probably. But I'll send some of them to you, what he's done.
I'd love to. And George Clooney was known for this,
Oh,
too.
yeah, sure. And the long con.
Oh, yes.
And I felt bad this time around when we redid Murphy. What do you guys don't call it reboots? You call it
Revival.
Revival.
Yeah. Reboot would be if they redid Murphy Brown with different actors.
So I was feeling bad halfway through the season that nobody had pulled a practical joke on Candace. So I tried a couple times. I actually sent away for fake snakes, and she never saw them, or she just never mentioned them, and because everybody was sort of standoffish, people didn't want to, play any jokes on her, and I finally sent away for dog crap, fake dog crap on Amazon, and I forgot where I put it in her trailer, and I never heard anything. The stagehand promised he put it in her trailer, and one day in the writing room, I get my lunch. It says Norm on the styrofoam carton. I open it up, and she had taken the dog crap and put it in a hot dog bun, surrounded by vegetables, whatever it was.
It was on Instagram.
Yes.
Yep. That's why she's the queen. Well, I think something that actually ties into the episode that you wrote is, and I think it's actually a theme that comes up a lot in other episodes in the show as well, but is that fine line within pranking that is the intention and the impact. And is something we see happen a lot throughout the show, that people have the best of intentions, but what they do impacts people negatively, and they're not quite ready for it. And that's why I love that the truth of it coming from you, that you've had this real life experience, that it did not go well. It was not the right way to do it. And that is what makes it so much more interesting than just like a prank episode.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a better one. And it's almost like stand-up, it's close-up magic. You don't really see where it's going, so you can never really get ahead of it. And so we were juking left, juking right, and I think it was really successful.
No, it's great.
And I really credit Diane for allowing that, because that was early on in the show. We had a lot more subject matter to cover. And it's quite amazing that show, that seems like a show you would do once you sort of run out of stories to tell. But it was just brilliant.
So I know that we've already covered Miles's Big Adventure, which was your first episode of season 2.
Yeah, but that was one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I love, we talked about it. We talked about the idea that we always try to look for stories in Murphy that where a character is going through something for the first time. And that was so fantastic that he was able to become an investigative journalist. It was baptism by fire. And I just loved it. It just seemed so obvious to do that to him. But also that episode just unfolded so beautifully, where here's a guy that just needed time off. Here is this type A personality who goes on vacation kicking and screaming. He didn't want to let go of that show. And then ultimately, we then think in the airport, maybe it's going to be about a guy that meets Yardley Smith and, wherever that's going to go, and he has to run away from her. Who knows? And then it becomes about this madman in a fighter jet with nuclear warheads. And I loved it for 2 reasons. One is obviously it put Miles into a situation he never dreamed about being in, and he was successful at it. But the other thing was, and when I wrote that long speech, it was a long speech when he was finally on air, and he talks about how abandoned the island is, and it was so quiet you couldn't even hear the birds. And really where I got that from, the whole tone of it, was Chernobyl had happened, 4 years earlier. Oh. So yeah. I just remember, I don't remember if it was Mike Wallace or Steve Croft, but somebody on 60 Minutes had covered Chernobyl around that time. And I remember seeing it on 60 Minutes, and so it was always in the back of my head, wouldn't it be cool to have sort of that kind of scenario? Not that we developed that show because of that, but when it came time for that speech of Miles, that's where I got it from. That's where I got the tone from. He was basically describing Chernobyl. And what I loved about the other part I loved was that Barnett Kellman, because it was back then. Today we would have done that same scene with green screen, and Miles would have been pictured.
We talked about that,
yep.
yeah.
Yep.
But it's more powerful, actually.
So much more powerful, isn't it?
Oh, it's way more interesting without seeing.
Yeah, plus the point of view is of the show.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that, and then we came to the point of like, oh, well, of course we're only hearing him because we're from the point of view of Murphy right now and the gang. And so it was more powerful when you just heard his voice. And funnier, I have to say, when he still thinks he's on camera, so to speak, and they're done and patting each other in the back, and he's doing this beautiful Hemingway type thing. And
it gives me goosebumps.
Not even there. Yeah.
Bless his
and
heart.
then what I also loved, Barnett then had a slow pan of the people listening to. I just get goosebumps. Barnett did that slow pan of the crew listening to Miles, and it was so powerful to just see them in awe of this guy in really a lot of danger. It was a dangerous situation for this poor kid.
For a man with so much anxiety.
Yes.
He really puts himself out there.
He was successful, too. He was just so good.
There's that. There's hiding from the gangster who wants to kill him.
Yeah.
There's an interesting, I forget who said the quote, but the idea that anxiety is fear what's on the other side of the door, and fear is when you open the door and the bear's actually there.
Joanna Gleason said that in our interview.
Yes, we were just talking about that. And but the great thing about that is I think that's Miles's problem, is he has the anxiety about what if there's a bear on the other side of the door. But when he opens the door and the bear is there, he actually shows up.
But isn't that life in general? I mean, isn't that all of us?
Yeah.
Don't we all build these narratives, these false narratives, and we get anxious about them? Just coming on this show, you start thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and you go to yourself, I don't want to give into that kind of anxiety. Let me just put myself out there and see what happens. And that's how I think most people get through their days. They're just afraid to put one foot in front of the other. They stay at their job too long. They stay in their hometown too long. And so that's sort of a microcosm of life.
Yeah, and it's not as scary as you think it's going
never,
to be when
right,
it happens.
It's never as bad as you think.
You go, oh, that was nothing, I think it's also different, I think, when it's happening to you, because having been sick for a while, and I'm fine now, guys, but and explaining it to people, because I already lived it, I sort of a little blasé about it. Oh, well, this happened and I almost died and blah, blah, blah. I remember when I was telling you about it, and the look I get back is I forget. People are like, oh my God. I'm like, no, but I'm fine now. But because it was happening to you, you don't realize how sort of dire it was, because you kind of had to just go through it. Yeah. And until I tell someone in their face and I go, oh, I'm sorry, I forget that I should not be as blasé about this when I talk about it.
Well, there's something about being on the other side of it. The being the survivor of something. I think about that with an attack that I went through. And when you talk about it, it's terrifying because that's the first time they're encountering it. They're not on the other side of the story yet. So you do get that reminder of like, oh, I know the ending's fine.
But even when you guys were going through all of this, isn't the human spirit amazing? What we will do to survive?
Yeah.
I mean, you will do anything to survive. Not everybody will, but the mass majority of people will be amazing in trying to get over whatever they're trying to get over, whether it's cancer, whether it's whatever.
That lizard brain is amazing. Our primal instinct.
My father had pancreatic cancer, and he was still fighting, even though he knew, the consequences were not going to be great. But I was just amazed watching him really fight it. It's just amazing to me, the human spirit.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories about Gilda Radner, because I played her in a movie, so I've done a lot of research on her. And it's not in this amazing documentary that everyone should see, because I helped with it a little bit. It's called Love Gilda. It's nominated for Emmys. Anyway.
It's so good.
I saw Love Gilda.
Oh, you finally saw it?
I saw it on the plane.
Oh, yay.
I loved it.
Great. So this is not in the documentary because it's from Gilda's point of view, and this is a story that Gene Wilder told. But the last time she went into the hospital, she didn't want to go in because she knew that she would not come out. This would be the last time if she had to go to the hospital. And she tried to run out. This is someone who is dying and knows that this is the end. But she had such an amazing spirit of wanting to live, which I think, as you're talking, is a human spirit, that she tried to run out of the hospital. Yeah. It's amazing.
Well, and I think to bring it back to Miles, I think that's the reason why I've never seen his character as a weak character. There's, I think that it's easy to write off somebody who's known as being high-strung and having a lot of neuroses as being a weaker character, especially next to someone like Murphy. But he always steps up. Even when he's up against a bigger guy, he will step up and do what he needs to do because he's incredibly strong of spirit. And I think he's such a great representation, especially for the people who don't feel like they're the biggest, strongest guys in the room.
I mean, the very fact, the whole show is based on this, right? That here's this guy just fresh out of Harvard who takes on this powerful, successful woman at her weakest time. Or I should say, really, she came back to prove a lot of things. And so she was tough on him and he went up against her. And I always thought that Grant was the co-lead of that show. Without Miles, I don't think there would have been a Murphy Brown. I think his character was so fantastic.
Yeah, it's two of them.
I mean, Diane did such an amazing job with these characters. For all of us, I mean, season 2 was when we were able to let loose, because season 1, Tom and I were working on Newhart. And it was just one of those, it was a great experience, and it was really, in its own way, a brilliant show. But it was the very conservative situation comedy, first act, big act break, second act. And then you come on to Murphy Brown with characters you've never seen before, with a 3-act structure. Diane brought the 3-act structure to television. We didn't settle in on just 1 act break. It was 2 act breaks, but they were all very just cohesive, and I'm trying to think of the word, but it just all, we all told great stories because these stories unfolded. Shows like Newhart and a lot of the CBS shows today are situations, you know. They're in a car, they're in a house, they're in a club, they're whatever. But it's just a scene unto itself, all strung together to create this 30-minute show, or a 21-minute show now. Murphy Brown wasn't like that. It's just we created stories where you just didn't know where they were going. And so we were lost in that first season. We didn't know how. Tom and I did not know how to write Eldon. We didn't understand him, even though now it seems so obvious. So by the second season, we were all a cohesive group, and we really got the show, and we were all able to let loose. And Diane was able to leave the room and write her scenes and leave us to do work and trust us in the room to do some work without her always in there. She was in there most of the time, but you know, a lot of times, especially late at night when we had to get scenes done, she would go into her office and just leave us kids to figure out certain things. I do remember this one thing in the second season when I don't remember what we were doing, but we're all fooling around, and she comes in and yells at us like a mother. And so everybody was just really quiet, and I just remember she leaves the room. There's this deathly silence, and all I remember saying was, "Told you," and it just broke up the tension.
Well, we brought up before, actually, I think, Jesse, this was your point, that having been an English teacher probably makes Diane really a good skill to have to be a showrunner.
Yes. I mean, she didn't do that a lot, but I remember a couple of times where it was like, you know, there was a lot of tension, and especially there was a lot riding on that show. And what did we do? 27 episodes that season. So
it's 26. And that counts, which we were talking about before, which the audience may not realize, but Brown Like Me was an hour episode, but it counts as 2 of the order. So really it was 25, but 26 half hours. And I had forgotten that when we started setting up season 2. And the reason it's taken us so long to get through season 2 is all of a sudden I went, oh my God, Jesse, this is going to take us longer. We need a break in between.
It's a big season.
This is not going to take us that's a lot.
Because I think we did 21 or 22 the first season. And then CBS obviously knew what they had, because we knew halfway through the first season that we had something special, because the Museum of Broadcasting wanted to do a tribute to Murphy Brown. And so by second season, you know, CBS knew that they had a bona fide hit.
Yeah, which I should say, because I was there today, now they call it the Paley Center for Media. I don't know if you realize that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Oh, there's 2. There's one in New York and one in LA. I think the one in LA, in Beverly Hills. But the one in New York is actually right next to CBS. It's next to Black Rock.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, 52nd Street.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's smaller, but it's really nice. I've been going there since I was 12.
Yeah, it's one of those secrets in the city that everyone should know about. Mm-hmm.
But it's great. And I think people might think that you can't go to the Paley Center because everything's on YouTube, but that's not true. There's a lot of stuff there that isn't streaming, that isn't on YouTube, from stuff that was on the last 20 years to watching your show of shows.
Yeah, which I actually would like to do. And I actually, speaking of that, I went to the building.
Yes, tell us about this.
Well, should we? Or, I mean, this should be about Murphy Brown.
Well, I mean, we like to talk about...
It's about you.
We like to talk about the history of television, that's for sure. Also, we can edit it out if you really want to. But if many people who are fans of television may or may not know that, if I may speak to you for a moment to introduce it, that your show of shows filmed in New York, and the offices are still here. And TV Land put a plaque up.
They did.
And you went in search of it.
I did. You know, I didn't think I was even going to get past the guard, but I went in the theater side of... What's it called? City
Center. It's where Manhattan Theater Club / City Center is.
So I went
now.
in the theater side, and I said, you know, I would love to see where your show shows was done. And I gave him a whole spiel that I'm a TV writer and blah, blah, blah. And he said, just go around the side. You'll see the plaque. I thought it was going to end there. And then he said, go talk to the guard and ask him to send you up to the 6th floor and talk to Aubrey, or 9th floor and talk to Aubrey. So I went up there, and God bless him, he sent me up to the 9th floor. I talked to Aubrey. She was going to call the operations manager, who happened to be on vacation. So she said, just call back. But I actually went downstairs down the staircase to the 6th floor, 6M, and just did my own investigating. And there I was in front of the office where the likes of Larry Gelbart and Mel Tolkien and Woody Allen was not a part of it.
No,
there's a mistake on the plaque, actually.
Yeah, because people get confused because Woody Allen wrote for Admirals at the Admiral Hour, which was a secondary show after. I don't know if it was really a spin-off, but I guess it was. Excuse me, losing my voice here.
Not a spin-off in the traditional sense, but
it was sort of they did another show,
project.
Which was just kind of some of the same writers. Also, Lucille Callan.
Yes, Lucille Callan.
I am a big fan of.
Mel Brooks, yes.
And Selma Diamond at one point. She replaced Lucille Callan.
Yeah.
Because Lucille Callan moved upstate and started writing mystery books.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Which is my dream, honestly.
Right?
Jessica Fletcher is all I want to be.
It's very hard to find information on her, and
Is she
I'm
still
fascinated.
around?
No.
Oh, I would
Yeah,
love
I mean,
to
they're all,
talk to her.
Mel and Carl are in their 90s now.
Yes,
So,
that's amazing. Carl Reiner, yes, he was part of it too.
yeah.
And so it was just really great. And so I took a video, which I never do. I usually just take photos, put it on Instagram. And then Mel Tolkien's son happened to see it.
No.
And he said he saw my picture in front of those double doors where his dad used to work, and he used to go as a little child. And he missed it up. He said he teared up when he saw, because he remembers those double doors.
Well, Mel Tolkien was the head writer, correct? Is my understanding?
I don't know.
Okay, because he and Lucille Callan were a team. That's how they got together. Because and I forget the name of it, but they all sort of met. A lot of them met doing this sort of not really summer stock, but this like summer camp.
Right, that Max Liebman
Yes,
ran.
the producer
it was
found
like
them.
it was like a camp. You're right.
Yeah, I don't think it was like a Catskills camp, but it was kind of. I
Yeah,
was
it
not
was like-
prepared
it
to
was a
talk about your
retreat
shows. I'm
kinda
sorry, guys.
thing, you know?
Sorry, Jesse. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just suddenly thinking about Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and going down a completely different tangent.
I know, right?
Don't mind
God,
me.
wouldn't it be great if they did an episode where she was on your shows?
Oh, I can dream.
Steal that idea, guys.
I was actually thinking as we were talking that it's a shame that we never did an episode on Murphy Brown where Miles actually wins an award, the Humboldt Award, for his coverage in Tobago.
Well, it's funny. I thought you were going to say flashbacks because I'm a huge fan of flashbacks, and I was always sad that there aren't that many flashback episodes in the series.
I was thinking about that too.
Yeah.
I was, as we were talking about Miles and Murphy, I was thinking, wouldn't it have been cool to see his first day on the job before meeting Murphy Brown?
Oh, from his point of view? Yeah, that
how
would be
petrified
interesting.
this kid was. And,
Oh, we'll write that fan fiction.
that just seems like it would have been a cool flashback to see that. Or an episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That would have been really cool to see because we do see him once he's been there.
Because Summer of '77 was one of my favorites.
It's one of our favorites too, actually, and I listed as my favorite of season 1.
Oh, well, we did kind of touch on a little bit, you talking about not knowing how to write Eldon right away. But I was wondering, it being your second season going in as a writer, were there any characters that changed for you to write or coalesced differently?
It's funny. Looking back on it, for whatever reason, Tom and I always gravitated towards Jim. Yeah. So we really never even thought about doing an Eldon episode per se. It never conjured in my brain. So for us, it was just trying to find different sides of Jim to write about. And yes, we wrote the Miles Big Adventure, but I don't really remember. I don't think that was our idea to write it. I think it was given to us, and I'm so glad it was. Tom and I always like to come up with our own episodes, and I don't think we came up with that one to write.
I will say, as a self-appointed president of the Jim Dial fan club, I appreciate everything you've done for me.
Oh,
as a fan.
I know he was such a special character. Why do you like him, Jesse? What was it about him? And I'm sure you covered it.
Oh yeah, but it's so funny. He's always been my favorite, and it's grown for me as we rewatch. Because there was always kind of a nostalgic love of him, and the more we watch, the more I'm able to articulate as an adult. For me, part of it is I think some of Charlie's inherent Minnesotan wholesomeness. That is, I was born and raised in Minnesota, so there's a certain thing that reminds me of the strong yet sensitive men that I grew up with. There were just such good, solid men who were great examples of how to be masculine without being aggro or negative. Yeah. I also love characters who take themselves too seriously.
Yes.
So there is something so wonderful in the humor of Jim when he is just like trying to be a classic anchor. And the fact that he is such a goofball. I mean, he truly takes himself so seriously, but when he gets tickled, it's such a reward for loving him.
I mean, Charlie, with his little details.
Face.
Yes. Just the way he would just make just a crooked little smile, or he was just so brilliant at it.
You see a lot of his stage experience too.
Yeah.
The small details and making Jim a human character, because we've talked about before in the show that I think another actor might have made him sort of a one-dimensional, stuffy,
a cliche.
Well, in a way, though, he was a cliche in the pilot. I don't really. I'd have to look through it. Maybe you guys know. I think he is speaking to your question. I think we were able to find his humanity as the seasons went along.
Yeah.
Right up to, I think it was the 9th season, when he was caught at the airport with a baggie of pot.
Season 10.
Season 10.
Because that's when Murphy had cancer.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So, to get Jim in trouble because he tried to bring pot through he just had no idea it was still in his coat pocket. Tom and I wrote that one too. And, it was just neat to put this goofball into this situation he never in a million years would have been in. And then Roasted was just, that was our baby.
Well, that was my first episode of Murphy Brown I ever saw.
Oh, well, let's talk about that.
And it's a very big Jim episode. Also, rewatching it recently, I think that I didn't see the first scene. I think that I tuned in. Oh. And it's funny how you just get weird flashbacks, but I think I tuned in on the second scene, which is when they go into the ballroom. They're like outside the ballroom, and she realizes that this is not going to be a good thing for him, that he does not want to be roasted. It is the worst thing to do. He's very melancholy. No. And it's such a character episode. And I don't know what took my attention to it, but you have this really funny scene and then this beautiful dramatic scene at the end, sitting at the Lincoln Memorial, correct? Looking over on the water and talking about life. And for some reason, little 12-year-old, 13-year-old me was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
And I just kept watching and became quite, a huge fan of it. But I realized that was my first episode.
My two memories of that show. One was, Tom and I could write the show. We knew that. But the hardest part about that episode for me was I am not a joke writer by trade. And I had to now come up with roast jokes. And I just remember, I don't know how many I came up with, 100 just bad ones to try to winnow it down to whatever it was, 10 or 11 or 12. And but in the end, I think I came up with some really nice, and the room came up with a couple, but the majority of them were my roast jokes that to this day I'm really, really proud of, because those are hard to do. And then the cast did such a good job, especially Miles. I remember Miles telling this little joke and just, slamming the punchline twice because he was so into it.
They really rub it in. They're all so excited to roast him, and he's just dying.
Yeah, those are tough.
Well, and I think that episode for me is kind of an heir apparent to Soul Man in many ways.
How's that?
In what we see in what Lauren is talking about, where we get these funny moments and then we get this incredible scene at the end. And I still, so far to this day, I'm still holding Soul Man up there toward the top of my list of episodes of this show.
It was a very important episode.
And I think something about Jim that stands out for me is, and I was raised by a family that was essentially a generation older than the rest of my friends' families. So I was raised in this environment of loving the kind of the living legends of the day, of people that I don't think my contemporaries necessarily knew much about. But I have such a fondness for the generation above. And so there's something about Jim that rings for me, but I think within that, it's being able to see the humanity of the living legend, of seeing the cliche in that pilot and then seeing it slowly get chipped away as you see the guy underneath, and having those moments of him bucking up against what should be a cliche personality. and getting to see the cracks underneath, I think, is just so endearing about him. He just gets better with age, like a fine wine.
And I love the idea that it doesn't matter how famous you are, how much money you make, you still have those primal fears about where do I get my passion now? Is that all there is? Jim was only 50 years old, I think, in that episode.
Oh, wow.
I am now 63. And he just seemed like he was so much older than that for whatever reason. And
there's something about the shelf life of his industry.
Yeah, but I think it even became really a human fear of this anxiety of what's next? What do I do? This mid-age crisis that he was going through. He was really struggling. And the thing that I really remember about that show was we always knew, Tom and I always knew we wanted to have that talk at the end. I'm thinking we have the Oak Room. We have it, the place that he was roasted. Why not find a little corner? Maybe we were talking about the Kochek room, someplace where these two could have a discussion. Tom, my writing partner, says, why don't we put it on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial? I said, Tom, Diane is not going to pay money for for a set for one scene. In my mind's eye, because I wasn't so production savvy as I am now, I'm imagining the statue of Lincoln, and I'm just imagining this much bigger set, which we could have also done with green screen today. But we brought it to Diane and pitched the idea of doing it on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and she said, "Yeah, let's do it." So for that one scene, it was so much more powerful. It was fun the way Murphy pretended the steps were freezing.
That was really good detail.
And his whole discussion, I can't remember it, but how beautiful the day is, and then the sun comes up and you see Tootsie Roll wrappers and gum wrappers on the steps, and so emotionally he started unraveling just with the vision of how the world has changed. And then, yes, obviously ending up with him running buck naked into the reflecting pool. I don't remember if he said Cannonball or Geronimo, but...
I think Cannonball.
I think it's Cannonball.
But it was just good that he was able to slink away to this one spot he always went to, and she was able to find him.
Well, and it's just, you see little Jim, it's... We don't change that much. Like you said, we all have these things.
Yeah, we're just children, aren't we? Really? We're not alive that long to...
Yeah. Like, what was it, Jesse, you said about Jerry Gold? Oh, little boy, who hurt you?
Yes. Oh, little boy, who hurt you? Oh, Jerry.
But season 2 was amazing in that respect. You introduced Jerry Gold. You introduced Miller Redfield. You introduced Bill Brown, Murphy's father. That was a jam-packed season. It was a fantastic season. Anchors Away, to me, I have the fondest memory because we were outside shooting on the back lot of Warner Brothers, pretending it was Libya. I think Jim talked some Arabic or whatever.
Oh, well, I mean, throwing back to like what they're seeing from the studio, like with Miles, that moment of Jim being threatened while he's in the Middle East and has guns around him is terrifying.
So powerful.
Oh my gosh. It's so good.
I think the picture is in that Murphy Brown book.
Yes, there's tons of pictures of you guys, filming that episode.
And it was fun shooting outside.
You didn't get outside much.
No. And then he finds out that, oh my God, I'm being replaced by this young, dumb
I was going to say,
newscaster.
Us talking about Roasted, having that episode at the beginning of the season really, I think, leans into Roasted, that this is something that, is apparent in his life. He is worried about being replaced by this little schmuck and had to pretend that it was okay. And so the fear is real of being replaced.
And if you really think about real life, Jim probably replaced some old fart.
Yeah.
So it's coming from a real place for him, even though we never talked about it.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also the fact that, when we have Corky come in second episode of the series, Double with the Blue Dress is coming in on Murphy, and then we have Jim. Like the great thing about having those kind of multi-generations in the gang is that you get to see it. Like, you think Murphy's the one getting replaced. Well, Jim's been around longer.
Good point.
Like, so it's interesting to see that happening on all the tiers and between both genders and the different ways that happens.
And Jim's not the kind of character who would talk about that kind of thing. So it ends up being really beautiful when he finally sort of takes that layer off of his sort of generation of we don't talk about these things and opens up to Murphy, who he feels comfortable with. It's really beautiful. And we've also talked about, and then we meet Doris. And she's the perfect foil for him.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah. She's the best.
Yeah.
Perfectly cast.
That's another season 2 guest star, right? We finally meet Doris.
Yeah.
The original and only Doris in our minds.
Janet Carroll.
Yeah, Janet Carroll. Really fantastic. Yeah.
The woman who would tame Jim Dial.
Yeah.
So I was listening to our first interview with you, and you had spoken about really loving writing for Yardley Smith. And I don't think we really talked about that.
She was already on The Simpsons, wasn't she?
I think so.
I think so. But it was
right about that time.
Yeah, it was same time.
Was it Tracy Ullman still? Or had the show? I forget. We did that episode such a long time ago.
Well,
I know.
It must have been, I think The Simpsons started in 89. Didn't they just celebrate their 30th year?
Yeah,
Yes.
that makes total sense.
Yes.
But I honestly did not know who she was back then. We loved her voice, that voice, and the way she sang "Yellow Bird."
So cute.
Gosh, it's
But
so
we really
good.
didn't know anything about her, and I honestly don't remember that much about her in that episode, except that she was perfect for the role.
Oh my
She was
gosh,
so
when
cute.
She just appears behind him.
Oh my God, it's like a nightmare,
Oh, she's a wonderful nightmare. Yeah.
and he's going to be stuck with her.
Exactly. Oh, and she loves him so much.
She loved him so much. Oh, so great.
I mean, if she hadn't come on so strong, I do believe that she is Miles's type.
Although I would argue.
Did they exchange numbers?
No, she stalked him and found him at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's what
She
it
found
was.
him.
That's what it was.
We jokingly talk about a lot on this series how people show up to this network news show and they let them
People
up in
find
the
them and
elevator.
get
Hey,
in
we should
very
go talk to
easily.
the security people. They
Yeah.
let everybody up.
Yeah, or say, you want to see Murphy Brown? Here's her address.
Yeah.
Just go to her house.
Just drive right up, no problem.
We could have actually done that today. Somebody could have been mad at her and then just advertised her address. That would have been a fun.
Oh, doxed her? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Oh well.
It was 1988, by the way. I mean, it was 1989. You are all correct.
We are correct.
31 years of The Simpsons, my brain could not remember.
But you have to remember, we were all so busy and we talked about this a little bit. I had no knowledge about Seinfeld. I had no knowledge about almost all the popular culture. I had no knowledge of The Simpsons at that point. We were just so busy. Just like the Simpson people probably had no knowledge about us.
Yeah, I think that most people don't realize, how many long hours you put in. It's not a 9-to-5
You
job
do not have
writing a
time
sitcom.
to watch television.
Yeah.
And then the last thing you want to do is watch TV. So.
That's true. What is it they say? Busman's holiday?
Yeah.
Is that the term? Yeah.
Busman's Holiday. I remember going to see Larry Gelbart speak before he even became a writer. And people asked him what his favorite show was. He says, I don't watch television. I remember sitting in the audience thinking, what? You're a writer and you don't watch TV? And that's what happens.
Well, Aaron Sorkin talked about that he gets too influenced, actually. For him, he doesn't have time, but it's also a choice. That if he is writing a project, he stops watching anything because he's such a sponge that he's afraid that he might accidentally steal something from someone.
Yeah, I get that.
I remember my first friend who ended up on Broadway, and she was saying, she's like, the worst thing about being on Broadway is I never get to see theater anymore.
Oh,
Yeah.
She's like, because I'm working when all the shows happen. It's like, oh, right. That's the other side of working in the industry, is that you aren't necessarily a participant of the viewing process anymore.
And then you become the worst audience because you become so analytical and pissy.
Oh, the other day I was watching a TV show with my fiance, and I stopped I almost said I stopped the tape. I paused the episode and turned to him and was like, do you have any idea how many hours they spent trying to get the lights in the background to do that? He was like, honey, I don't care. I was like, never mind. But that's what I see now. I'm like, that poor crew spent so much time working on that one thing, and the actors, if they messed up one line, that would have been so annoying. And I just went to this full industry speak and analysis. I was like, oh, I'm not fun to watch this with anymore.
Well, that's why, we thank God that all the writers got along, because if you tried to go home and tell your wife about your day, it's met with a dull thud, because it loses everything in translation. You just literally had to be there. So yeah, I barely talked about my job when I went home.